Welcome to This Day in His Story, created by American Heritage Worldwide. A reminder that every day holds something new to learn. Did you know that, as a child, Beatrix Potter lived a lonely life with few friends? Fortunately, her large house was surrounded by woods and vegetable gardens, squirrels, rabbits, and mice that became her friends. Take a walk with Beatrix and her brother Bertram, who roamed the countryside in search of nature and animals. As Beatrix drew pictures and wrote stories about the adventures of her newfound friends as they made their way into her famous 23 illustrated children's books.
So, here's a thought for you. If I told you that the author of, The Tale of Peter Rabbit was also a pioneer in intellectual property licensing, decades before major brands were really doing it, and then also became a globally recognized expert in sheep genetics, you'd probably think I was describing three different and frankly improbable people.
Exactly. But she was all of those things. And that's the core puzzle we're tackling today. We all know Peter Rabbit. It's a global phenomenon. I mean, over 45 million copies sold, translated into 36 languages. The sheer market penetration of that little blue jacket is just unbelievable.
Right. But this deep dive is designed to show you that the bunny was just the gateway. It was the start of a life that was so much more complex and honestly more consequential than most people ever realize.
That's our mission here. Based on the sources, we want to go beyond the best-selling author. We're revealing Beatrix Potter and her sort of three lesser-known roles.
The rigorous, self-taught naturalist.
The sharp, early businesswoman.
And the dedicated conservationist whose legacy literally shaped the map of the Lake District in England.
And the objective is to trace that progression. How did this intense solitude, this isolated Victorian childhood, lead her to not just illustrate small creatures, but to dedicate her whole later life to the massive, quiet preservation of entire landscapes? It's a fascinating arc, from a confined, lonely life to becoming one of Britain's most important environmental stewards.
So let's start right at the beginning, with the roots of that deep dive into nature. She was named Helen Beatrix Potter, after her mother, Helen, but, well, she was always known by her middle name.
Right, and when you look at her early life, the single most defining factor is the isolation.
Totally. Beatrix and her younger brother Bertram were taught at home by a governess. Their parents were very ambitious Victorians, rarely home, and they really expected Beatrix to be confined and proper.
Which meant very little contact with other kids, especially in that big, restrictive London house.
But that solitude, it wasn't a void, was it? It became her personal laboratory. Beatrix developed this absolutely intense fascination with the natural world, and it led her to keep what you could only call an astounding menagerie of pets.
Yeah, and we're not just talking about a couple of beloved rabbits. We're talking hedgehogs, frogs, newts, snakes, mice.
The mice. This is where you really see the naturalist side emerge, I think.
Right.
It wasn't just passive pet ownership.
No, not at all. The sources describe her running what was, basically a tiny personal zoological research lab inside her own house.
She would capture mice and just let them run loose.
Let them run loose so she could constantly study them, drawing their activities, focusing on every single twitch, every whisker, every little behavioral pattern.
Can you just imagine the chaos?
Yeah.
And frankly, the smell in this high society Victorian home.
Yeah.
Doubling as a kind of anatomy studio with live animals everywhere.
It really underscores an intensity that went way beyond just drawing practice. She wasn't just sketching, she was conducting detailed field studies in her spare time.
And that observational skill was definitely influenced by her parents, artistically at least. Her father, Rupert Pryor, was a lawyer, but he spent most of his time on photography and art.
And her mother, Helen, was skilled in watercolor and embroidery, so Beatrix inherited that visual discipline.
But did they really support her career? I mean, a professional career as an artist, given the times? Or was it just seen as a respectable hobby for an unmarried daughter?
That's a crucial point. For the establishment, it was a hobby. Her life was structured around her parents' social calendar. But her real passion for drawing nature wasn't fulfilled in London. It was during the family's summer escapes.
Right. Every year, she and Bertram would be free to just roam the countryside.
Searching for specimens, drawing, especially during those long summers in Scotland and, most importantly, the Lake District.
Ah, the Lake District. That specific setting became absolutely essential to her work. That landscape really cemented itself in her mind when she was just 16, I believe. Her parents rented Ray Castle near Ambleside.
And that geographical shift from the constraints of London to the freedom of the fells, that fundamentally shaped the entire world her characters would later inhabit. Okay, we have this intense, self-taught, rigorous observation. We have volumes of beautiful drawings. But how does that private art become a public juggernaut?
Well, the path wasn't exactly straight. She did attend the National Art Training School in the late 1870s trying to find an outlet. But it was actually a family connection that pushed her toward publishing.
The Reverend Rawnsley.
That's him, a family friend and a key figure in founding the National Trust, which is a detail that becomes very important later. He encouraged her to make greeting cards from her illustrations and then eventually to think about a book.
Which brings us to the just charming origin story of Peter Rabbit. The book didn't start as some planned manuscript.
No, it was born from a simple, spontaneous act of kindness. An illustrated letter she wrote in 1893 to the sick son of her former governess, Annie Moore.
Think about that. A piece of private correspondence meant to cheer up one single child becomes one of the best-selling pieces of literature in history.
And when she finally decided to publish it, she had to write to the boy, Noel Moore, and ask to borrow the letter back, just so she could copy the pictures and the stories.
And then she returned it to him.
Of course she did. It speaks to her meticulous nature.
So when she first approached publishers, she faced rejection. They found her style too simple, or they wanted to colorize her drawings. So she did what any good entrepreneur does. She took control. She published The Tale of Peter Rabbit privately, December 16th, 1901.
And the success was immediate, undeniable. By 1902, the trade edition was out, and she quickly followed up with Squirrel Nutkin and The Tale of Benjamin Bunny.
Over the next few decades, she wrote and illustrated 23 of these books, giving us the whole cast: Jemima Puddle Duck, Miss Moppet, the Floxy Bunnies, Mr. Jeremy Fisher.
But this is where we pivot, from artist to really an astute businesswoman.
It's fascinating how quickly she saw the commercial power of her intellectual property. In 1903, only 2 years after Peter Rabbit was published, she registered the design for a Peter Rabbit doll with the British Patent Office.
Wait, a licensed doll design in 1903? That is incredibly early for that kind of thing.
It is. She was an extraordinary anomaly. She was marketing, designing, and licensing her own products immediately, turning a literary success into a full, vertically integrated brand, years before big corporations like Disney perfected that model.
So she's one of the earliest known female entrepreneurs to truly master IP licensing, asserting control over her characters' identities in a way that just defied the constraints placed on women in business back then.
Absolutely. And that ability to move seamlessly from the high-level artistry to the gritty details of business, that sets the stage perfectly for her second act, an act that most people never, ever associate with Beatrix Potter.
And the whole narrative just shifts completely. In 1905, she uses the money from her books to buy Hilltop, a small farm in the village of Surrey. This was her escape, and it was a real turning point.
And she kept writing there for the next 8 years. The environment was directly fueling her creativity. 7 of her books are set in or around Hilltop, so the landscape was now providing both the inspiration and the setting.
And she kept expanding. In 1909, she bought Castle Farm, which became her main home in the Lakeland. And she wasn't just relying on imagination for her characters anymore, was she? She was drawing from life.
Right. 2 of her animal characters, Tom Kitten and Samuel Whiskers, were based on actual pets that lived right there at Castle Farm.
Then came the full commitment to the land. In 1913, she married a local solicitor, William Heelis, and her focus became almost exclusively agriculture. For the next 30 years, she was a dedicated Lakeland farmer, shifting her identity from celebrated author to this pragmatic woman of the soil.
And this wasn't some celebrity side project. She gained serious, recognized expertise in farming. In 1923, she bought Troutbeck Park Farm, where she started specializing in breeding the local Herdwick sheep. And she won many country show prizes for her breeding work.
Which is an achievement that really needs context. The world of traditional, rural sheep farming in northern England was notoriously insular and male-dominated.
Absolutely. And yet, through her rigorous practical work, she earned so much respect that she was elected as the first woman president of the Herdwick Sheep Breeders Association.
That is just a staggering statement. It says so much about her competence and her commitment to the regional culture and economy.
To go from being sort of dismissed as a children's book author to leading a prestigious agricultural association, it's a testament to her uncompromising ambition and her talent.
But even as a successful farmer, those early naturalist interests, they never really died.
No, they just shifted focus. In 1930, she purchased 4,000 acres known as the Monk Coniston Estate. And there, she continued her scientific pursuits. She created these detailed watercolors and drawings of local fungi, mosses, fossils.
And these weren't just sketches. These were highly detailed scientific records. She later donated them to the Armit Library in 1934.
She was meticulous to the very end, and her final literary output reflects this shift in priority. She published The Fairy Caravan in 1926, and her final book, The Tale of Little Pig Robinson, in 1930. Her life as a steward of the land was now complete.
So the first half of her life was about the isolated observation and drawing of nature, and her middle life was dedicated to working the land.
Her final years turned almost entirely to its permanent preservation. This deep-seated love, born in those childhood summers, it completely dictated her legacy.
Which brings us to the culmination of her life's work. She passed away on December 22nd, 1943, and her will made sure that her commitment to the natural integrity of the Lake District would outlive her.
She left the vast majority of her land holdings to the British National Trust. And critically, this wasn't a small donation. It was a foundational conservation act. Her bequest included 14 farms, 4,000 acres of land, and flocks of the native Herdwick sheep.
That's just monumental in scale. Her primary desire was clear. It was explicit. Protect the land from modern development and preserve the specific, fragile beauty of that area for all future generations.
It's the ultimate so what of her life. All those early observations of mice and frogs, translated directly into protecting the mountains and valleys that inspired them, it connects her entire life narrative. The child who was denied freedom in London ensured that the land where she finally found her freedom would remain wild forever.
And before we close out, we have to mention one last detail. It's just so charming, and it speaks to her private, inventive side. Beatrix Potter, maybe reflecting that isolated early life, left behind a journal written entirely in a complex, private code.
The code, yes, which when you finally hear about it, it makes sense, doesn't it?
It really does. And when that code was finally cracked, the stories and illustrations inside were published in 1966 as the Journal of Beatrix Potter.
So when we synthesize this incredible life, you see this powerful progression. Beatrix Potter moved from intense private observation of the mice and frogs in her quiet home to massive public achievement as a literary pioneer and a highly respected agricultural leader.
And finally, she transitioned into the ultimate quiet preservation of the very landscapes that nurtured her talent.
It's an overwhelming gift. 14 farms and 4,000 acres of land. It wasn't a literary donation. It was a true act of environmental legacy, driven entirely by that deep, lifelong commitment to the natural world.
And this raises a really interesting question for you to think about as you wrap up this deep dive. Her coded private journal is a metaphor, really. It's a metaphor for the deeper insights and actions that are so often hidden beneath a well-known public image.
Right. Her public legacy is the conservation of 4,000 acres. But why did she feel the need to code her thoughts? What other hidden defining insights, like the ones only revealed when her code was cracked, might we find when we dig deeper into the quiet, complex lives of influential people whose visible success captures only one dimension of who they really are? That hidden knowledge is something for you to mull over, or maybe explore on your own.
Thank you for joining us for this day in His story. May the lessons of yesterday inspire you to see God's hand today and to play your part in His story now. For more faith-based learning, visit ahsworldwide.org, the home school for faith and family.